All right, today I want to talk about what is the most important story to me, right? So, as I've said in the opening, or I said maybe last week or so, and you probably have seen it even in a lot of the other content and branding and that sort of thing, is I'm a Christian, and so I'm coming from a Christian worldview. And so the most important story to me is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's a very important story for me. And the reason why I want to share it is not only like a sense of like trying to proselytize or trying to, evangelize, but it's also like this concept of like, I want you to hear my worldview. And I think as a result of hearing my worldview, you'll understand like the books that I write, the sense of hope that I want to see in the world and through the writing and through the authorship. And I think it's just a great opportunity to talk about just kind of what I would say I would hold dear or foundational. And so when we talk about, Christians talk about like, what is the gospel? There are different kind of dimensions of what that looks like. Gospel in a practical way is an engagement with what we see in the Bible. We see in 1 Corinthians 15, 3, something that is of first importance, biblically or theologically, that sort of thing. And so what I'm essentially saying is that that in my own self, in my own strength, I can't please God, that it's impossible for me to please God inherently, but I need a rescue. I need someone to stand in my place and for my sake and to satisfy the wrath of God for my personal sin, but also for a sense of decay and brokenness that is in the world. And so that is kind of a foundational structure for my storytelling is this understanding that we all sin and fall short of the glory of God, that there's none righteous, no, not one, but that Jesus Christ gives us an opportunity to impress God, not because of our works, but because of the work of Jesus. And so a lot of theologians have broken this vision for the gospel into two different spaces. One, in a personal way, when we talk personally about the gospel, we're talking about God, man, Jesus, our response. And so when we talk about God, we're saying that the triune God, initially in his construction of the world, created mankind in creation in a sense of holistic flourishing, that there was not a sense of brokenness or decay in the world. Then mankind rebelled against God, causing a brokenness or a chasm or a sin. And that sin is ultimately our desire to go in our own way, to move towards the things of self and things of flesh, and not to rest in the personal work of Jesus Christ. And so to sin, or to someone would argue, based on what we see in the Bible, we see specifically in like Romans 1, is this concept of when we worship things that God has created and not he himself, right? And so that is the nature of like what is sin. And from that sin or from that brokenness, we see humankind, that is kind of, some could argue the deepest issue that we have is a unsettling in us of how do we satisfy the brokenness that is within all of us. Brokenness that may appear in a variety of different ways, but ultimately that we need to rest in who Jesus is. And so that is a sense of the bad news. And the good news is that I believe that God came in the flesh, and when we talk about Christmas and the incarnation, that he lived a life that we could not live, that he was born of a virgin, that he was conceived, that he lived a sinless life, and in the life that he lived was a model for what we as human beings should seek to walk out, as we see throughout the Gospels. We see the story of Jesus and just the amazing things that he did, but the ultimate sacrifice that he made for us was that in a sense of moving, or a sense of grace, and a sense of sacrificial love, he died for us. As a result of his death, it gives us an opportunity to now satisfy the wrath of God. And we're satisfying it not because of our personal work, our personal abilities, our intellect, or whatever, but because of the the personal work of Jesus. And so that becomes the nature of what it means to be a Christian. Is not that we're saying that in and of ourselves that we are good or we're good enough or what have you, but that Jesus gives us the bridge or the ability to now please God because of what he has done. And so a Christian isn't saved by his works or her works or what they've done, but through what Jesus has done for us. And so that's what it means to be a Christian in a personal sense, but also in a holistic sense that going back to as I initially started it, the creation or the story of creation is that there was a sense of flourishing, and that that when we see man and mankind's sin, we see a brokenness in a distortion in all of the created order. That there is a brokenness in not just all of us, but in systems. There's a systemic type of brokenness, and that passes and it grows to a variety of different issues. As we see in the personal work of Jesus Christ, not only do we see a type of redemption through the cross, but we also see a restoration of the chaos that we see throughout within the world. And so the hope of the future hope is what we see in Revelations, toward the latter part of Revelations, where we have a hope of actually being able to behold Jesus and seeing him face to face or in full. We see him in part right now, but we have an opportunity to rest with him eternally and to have a connection with him. And Christians are living in what they call the already but not yet, that Jesus has done his person and his work for us already, but he is not yet truly we don't completely are able to experience in him, but we live in light of that reality, live in light of that hope, and that hope should lead us in everything that we do. And so for me as a business owner, as someone who uses my platform and what I do for God's glory, is I use that hope to fuel why I go into schools and why I go into some places that are tougher, but using from a posture of hope. I want to talk to kids about things like life skills. I think that sometimes even we as Christians, we focus only on the spiritual, and I think that our goal is holistic, right? And so one of the ways I believe that we can love our neighbor as self is through talking about career development and skill building and entrepreneurship. Not necessarily because we want kids to be greedy or to cling to money or anything like that, but we do need resources to survive. And I think that there is a type of way in which we can give the next generation more options, right? So there's no difference from a person intrinsically, their value and their worth in them. If a person has a minimum wage job and they can't do a whole lot, there's no difference in that person than in a person who's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company who got a bunch of businesses working for them. And there's no intrinsic difference, value and worth in that person. But that person who is in the CEO position has more options. It has more opportunities, I think, I would argue, has more options to not only work in a way that's not going to consume them physically and from a physical standpoint, but also the person with the more options, I would say, can also empower other people, their subordinates. They can empower potentially workers. They can empower their staff. There's a lot of other ways in that position of leadership that person can help other people. And so my goal with Grace to Cultivate LLC is to from a gospel hope to lead me in my business and in the professional developments, that professional partnerships that I'm building with different schools and variety of different career spaces. I am respectful and intentional about understanding that everyone isn't a Christian and everyone may not agree with me in some areas. But I think that most people would agree that we want to see the holistic flourishing of our kids. We want to see the holistic flourishing of our families, of our communities. And this is some way that I do that through the White Fiction that's behind me, or through the leadership workshops that I do at schools, seeking to partner with some vocational rehab groups, seeking to partner with a variety of different fields, and also the digital content that I put out. And so this is kind of me in a nutshell. And so this is the most important story to me, the gospel, and that leads me in my business pursuits, and leads me in my writing, and leads me in a lot of different other areas. And so I think it's a supernatural story, so I don't necessarily put it in the same category as, everyone else or that sort of thing. But I do think that there's some connections between how the gospel is communicated, and even how story in and of itself, or great stories, even from secularists, are put together, or how they perceive a great story. And there's some connections and parallels when we talk about motifs like forgiveness and redemption, and different themes, and even the plot structure. And we'll get into plot structure, but it goes from thesis to antithesis, or the opposite of that thesis, and then synthesis. And so how I think that there's even some connection in what I shared in terms of kind of a Godward story versus what we try to reproduce as human beings. And so anyway, we'll talk more about it. I think it's always important to share my worldview, my perspective, and so you can see kind of where I'm coming from. I think I want to try to make this as a safe space for whoever is, in the comment section or whatever. But I think if I don't share my worldview, share my perspective, I don't want you to come to the table and be like, who is this person? Where they're coming from. But I think it's an important story to share. And so, that is the most important story to me. This is a piece of digital content I wanted to put out, just kind of leading a foundational vision of kind of where I'm coming from. And we'll just kind of go from there. So I appreciate you guys, and I do believe that there's grace to cultivate. Y'all have a great day. Be encouraged.